Uh, that was pretty funny comment, Ed, on Ben Rankin's Saints 7 inches of pleasure video. You cheeky devil. Um, yeah, it seems to be in the air at the moment. All this uh, that Albert's book I've never read, but that would be good for sure. I had to, while we're on that subject of Sharpies and all that shit, I'll get into that in a bit more detail in a minute. But this is a reproduction of the poster for the Who and Small Faces. Um, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. This is a signed print by the artist that created this poster. I think I paid 200 for it. It's a beautiful print. That's why it's framed. But that was the poster from January '68, Sydney Stadium, Monday, January the 22nd, and Tuesday, January the 23rd. I'm not sure which day me and my mates went. Um, I was I was a hooey in those days before they turned to shit. Like Tommy. I hate that album with a vengeance, and that was the end of the Who, more or less, as far as I was concerned. But at this stage, this was just before that ghastly Magic Bus single came out. So this was when the Who and the Small Faces were at their absolute peak, in my opinion. Um, the big single that had come out just before this tour by the Who was "I Can See for Miles," which is probably the greatest thing they ever did. It's awesome track that, and and it was the Small Faces sort of that just before they went to Steve Marriott started getting all hippy drippy, and they started to lose that mod, you know, organ driven dance music, whatever you want to call it. But of the two, this is for Ben Rankins in particular. He mentioned reading the Alberts book, how he wished he could have seen the Small Faces. I think me and my mates all agreed that the Small Faces definitely were I mean, we couldn't believe these little blokes about 3 foot tall, but the sound that came out of it, and Steve Marriott, what an attitude! The audience are all, he's going, "Fuck yeah," and we're just going, "Whoa, this is grown up stuff." The Who were, I mean, come on, they were both fantastic. What a way to start, seeing a big international artists. I missed the Beatles, the Stones, and all that because I was a bit too young and didn't have the money. But that was a great introduction and never to be forgotten. Anyone that was at the Sydney Stadium gigs remembers this concert tour very, very well. The Who were basically chucked out of Australia and told never to come back. This is true. The Prime Minister, whoever it was at the time, some jerk off, and he said, "Don't come back." and and Keith Richards mentions it in his book too, about New Zealand, being a backwater, which it was. Australia was, but New Zealand's like Stone Age shit. And the Who played over in New Zealand, and a guy, a publican or something, came up to Pete Townsend. Oh, that's right, Pete Townsend's book, not Keith Richards. Some publican in New Zealand came up to Pete Townsend and said, "Well, we welcome you. Most welcome to stay here." After he'd heard, about them, the Prime Minister of Australia, getting the shits with the Who. It was all over some fracas on an airline flight from Sydney to New Zealand. I can't remember. It's a long time ago. Yeah, never to be forgotten. And so that's it. That's the. There she blows. Not very good. Wish I had a 4G camera, but yeah, and the Sharpie thing. in Billy Thorpe's book, uh, not most people I know think I'm crazy. The first one, Sex and Thugs and Rock and Roll, Billy Thorpe's first book. Um, it's about him coming down from Brisbane to Sydney and joining up with the Aztecs in Sydney. About his early 60s, 63. Um, and the very, very first, what you would call Sharpies, were just starting around then. There was a guy called Mad Mick, and he was part Chinese or something, and built like a tank, short little squat guy. And apparently, they got into a huge. They were sort of friends with this gang, and they had to be sort of. I mean, it's like I was friends with my Sharpie mates at the tax department. I mean, they weren't tax accountants. We were the shit people that worked down in the basement. Went and got them. What do you call them? Errand boys, basically. And yeah, Wayne was my favourite. He's a funny little fella. And they came from really deprived, sort of working class backgrounds in the inner west of Sydney. You know, I forgot to mention that Angus was briefly hanging out with the Burwood Sharps, which were more. They used to terrorise the northwest lines. They used to go up to Hornsby and that, and that's where um, that's on the North Shore. On the south, I was never attacked by any Sharpies because I knew their ways because I knew a couple of them and I knew what to do and what not to do. And the thing is, you don't show fear. You just, you know, I knew most people would have just jumped in front of the train when those cunts come up that stairs that night. 1 o'clock in the morning, they had these really ugly. There's about 40 of them. There's about 20 really ugly girls, and the young Angus Young age Sharpies, a couple of years younger than me, or 4 years younger, and they were a bit nervous because I was older than them. And what they didn't know was packing. I was packing some gear on me. Let's put it that way. I used to carry a massive butcher's knife, and so if it got real ugly, someone would have lost something. And anyway, that also gave me confidence. I could just sit and stare at them, knowing that they would. I think they must have picked up. I don't know, but they sent the girls up. These ugly looking things. They look like those creepy, shit looking Sharpies from Melbourne in the early to mid '70s. They were like the chicks was, and they're just so fucking ugly. The fashions, like the Sydney Sharps. See, I was getting off track there. The original Sydney Sharps started in the early '60s in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and the headquarters, they're called Sharpies because there was a famous golf shop opposite Central Station, and had a big neon sign with a guy swinging a golf club. And it was there for decades, many, many, many decades. Gone now. They got their name Sharpies from Sharpies Golf House. And the Sydney Sharps, when I was hanging out with them in '68, '69, they weren't like those shitty rat tails and mullets and shit from Melbourne. They had class, these guys. They only dressed in golfing gear, like alligator shirts, high-waisted pants, um, steel cap boots sometimes, but they were just very neatly dressed. And mums and dads would have thought, oh, what nice young boys, but Christ. Anyway, yeah, what really happened to the Sharps in Sydney was the reason why they faded away very early in the '70s was they made the huge mistake of picking a fight with some sailors off one of the Australian ships that had just come back from Vietnam, and they just went, instead of picking on some poor little guy with long hair in an alleyway and beating the shit out of him, they come up against the bloody Navy boys. And it was never in the papers, but through underground, we know that the rumour is that one Sharpie or two were possibly killed. What happened was the sailors went down to the disco that was near Sharpies, I forget the name of the disco, but where the Sharpies used to hang out. And it was downstairs, and the sailors got to this place, and the Sharpies came running up the stairs to, have a blue, and these sailors just demolished them. And and the rumor is that one or two Sharpies were killed, but it was never in the papers. They just hushed the whole thing up because of the scandal. So I think the Sharps basically burnt out in in 69, 70, when they made the huge mistake of taking on the Australian Navy. Anyway, that's just a bit of history. And none of it's bullshit. It's all true. There's stuff I can't even talk about. Anyway, have a nice day.